Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evans Mauta, and I'm going to do a presentation entitled Prospects of Cleaner Fuels. My outline of the presentation is as follows. We have the ARA roadmap, ARA Clean Fuels Policy, AFRI roadmap for cleaner air, the timeline that is, AFRI fuel specifications, AFRI 3 and 4 compliance, highlights of ECOWAS and AU meetings. So the ARA roadmap. The ARA was started in 2006 in response to the removal of lead in fuels. And the initial objective, of course, was to push for improvement of public health and reduce mortality rates related to emissions. The ARA developed a roadmap for Africa to match, so that fuels need to match with the technology and emission standards with the following objectives: to improve air quality, aid refining investments, establish a roadmap towards product quality, to match fuel evolving fleet with the African climatic conditions and emission standards, and also consideration of the fuel and the engines as one unit for exhaust emissions of the clean air. So the Clean Air Fuels Policy is being propagated by our application of AFRI standards across Africa as a minimum requirement. Actions to implement AFRI 4 by 2020 and AFRI 5 by 2035, alongside vehicle exhaust emission limits. AFRI 6 is currently under development, which is with the intention of implementing it maybe around 2035. Fuels and vehicles need to be approached as an integrated unit. So the maintenance and inspection controls also, which are observed to be weak in most countries, need to be incorporated as we evolve towards a cleaner environment. The socio-economic benefits of finance needed to upgrade refineries. As you are aware, most of these refineries are operating in environments where they provide an economic benefits to the institution. So the migration, there are options in most cases whether to close them and import or upgrade them. So those are the challenges that most governments, and especially the shareholders of these refineries, have to encounter every day. One option leads to severe socioeconomic challenges. As a result, they need to be helped to migrate towards cleaner fuels. And the phase, as you are going to see further, is slightly slower than what is expected. So, and the next one is harmonization of regional fuel specifications. During our experience in the last few years, we've realized that different countries have different standards. And the approach is to try and have harmonized standards for the region as a way of trying to improve the control of the quality of fuels that come into a region. So, and of course, the encouragement of the implementation of necessary regulatory framework and communication campaigns to all stakeholders. It is our realization that some regions might have weak regulations, others might have. So it's important that the regulatory framework, which also forms part of the ARA, is strong enough to ensure that it's applied to avoid different fuels being approached under different guidelines into any region. So what we have there is a timeline. Yeah, is a timeline. So the timeline there is showing us where we should have been, the milestones where we should be with each AFRI specifications. As you see on the left there, there's a timeline of starting from AFRI 2 going all the way down, with emphasis on sulfur. But of course, as we go futuristic into AFRI 5 and AFRI 6, we're also going to be looking at benzene. So the timeline was that by 2020, we should have been at AFRI 4, and by 2030, at AFRI 5, and about 2035 to be at AFRI 6. That's our milestones that we set. But as you see in the next slide, it has been a challenge even to get most of our members to AFRI 4 so far because of some of the issues related to migration towards cleaner fuels, especially for refining countries, because investments challenges are huge. So we have a scale of specifications from AFRI 1 to AFRI 5, and it shows how the plan was, oh, sorry about this again. So the plan was to migrate from AFRI 1 to AFRI 4, and we'll see that the thing that the parameter that is changing is, that has changed much, is the sulfur, and that's our primary focus. But as you're going to see, going future, we'll see that benzene is also coming in, like I mentioned earlier. So that's our timeline, and you can see the diesel, the chart there on the diesel with a drop of over 90%. And you see that most of the refining countries, especially in the region, sub-Saharan region, they are still operating between 4,000 and 5,000. And it's been a challenge for them even to move to 500. So it's even much more challenging for them to move to 50. And some regions are contemplating 10. So it's a huge task. So what are we saying on the AFRI 6? So discussions are underway for AFRI 6, and it's even tighter than the AFRI 5. So we've proposed new specification, but this is still at committee stage, which should be getting through the committee stages by mid this year or towards the last quarter of this year for approval, and then we can put a date and try to conscientize our members. So the key parameters there is proposed is to reduce the sulfur to about 2030. We haven't reached the mark. We are still discussing on agreements whether it should be 20 or it should be 30. And the aromatics to oscillate around 35%. And the density ranges, of course, this is to do with diesel. Metallic additives for those that deal with petrol, I think, because we'll be considering with petrol as well. Sorry. Olefins and proposed diesel improvements also on the sulfur to be 20 to 30, diesel density 82 to 8.82 to 0.845, and it's a 10 number of about 51. So these are just proposals that are currently being discussed. Several members have raised options on, have raised views on the limits of some of the products. So I think as we harmonize, we should come up with a harmonized specifications. As you know, standards approach is usually, you involve different stakeholders. It's not a one voice, because all players have to be comfortable with what is obtaining and what you can achieve. At times you can have standards that put in place and you fail to achieve them because you overstated, you are very ambitious and overstated your goals. So we're trying to have it unanimously approached with realistically attainable goals. So AFRI compliance, like you can see from that chart, most countries are compliant with AFRI 3. Okay, maybe half of the countries are compliant with AFRI 3. There are countries that are still not compliant, but we're supposed to migrate to AFRI 4. And if we are still struggling at AFRI 3, then how do you get to AFRI 4? That's been our challenge. If you see on AFRI 4, we set the goals for AFRI 4. By 2020, we should have been, and 2020 is just a year from now. And that's the state of the situation currently obtaining in most of these countries. So we have a mammoth task amongst our members to try and ensure that the whole map is green. So the next is the interaction on how we are going to approach the issue of specs, and this has been to deal with the regional blocks. And the ARA partnered with ECOWAS on the study for West Africa, and the following recommendations were made towards this aspect. So public information and awareness, affordability, sulfur limit was agreed to 50 ppm when imported gasoline and gas oil from 2020. The benzene component limited to about 1% from 2020. Restrictions of vehicle imports to minimum Euro 4, registration and compliance and enforcement schemes for all in-use vehicles for all member states by 2024. Refineries to be upgraded, refineries to be granted a waiver to 2025 to make necessary investments, and highlighted financing issues, notably for establishment of necessary testing and compliance bodies as well as for refining. Another meeting was held with the African Union. So what we've noted in the past is that we needed to involve governments, and that's why the issue of regional blocks is coming in, to try and see if policy could be influenced that way. And since in most of these cases, the shareholders are the governments, and if it comes from the policy level, maybe to push them to invest in upgrades. As you know, diesel especially requires huge investments. So an ARA delegation met the AU officials in Addis Ababa in May, and the study was proposed for adoption for AFRI specification and a roadmap by the AU. The ARA has proposed to finance the study, and the AU Commission has committed to organizing stakeholders validation workshop ahead of time. And these workshops will be basically on the regional communities. The study will analyze the socio-economic health benefits for the AU, adopting the AFRI clean policies fuel. One challenge is that the government ministries, which has been the challenge before, to share the objectives and be at the same page. And as you are aware, in countries, it's not only African, government move at their own pace. So I think, and in particular in our regions here, they form the basis at which we move. So we need to see how we can coordinate, bring the government in through the regional bodies, through the AU, and so on, to try and see how they can buy into the vision and be part of this, and maybe it can change their minds towards investments. Thank you very much.